Welcome to Property Mates, where your hosts Tim Perry and Felix Tang discuss all things property and everything else in between. So welcome back, everyone. Property Mates, we've got Tim, Felix here. We thought we'd continue the conversation that we had in our first podcast, which was about success and setting goals. So in this session, we wanted to really talk about, how do you actually really succeed in anything that you're looking at doing, and kind of leveraging off what other people have done for success. And one of the biggest things for us and what we've learned is that you need to have the right people in your team. So we wanted to really kind of dive into that section a bit more and kind of elaborate in terms of the importance of having the right team players supporting you for success. And we can definitely go through, and I can share exactly who the people you would need if you're looking at purchasing a property, but also the relevance and importance if it's something else that you're looking to succeed in life, and what those kind of attributes would mean. But we've got Tim here as well. Tim,
hey guys, yeah.
How's your day been? How's your morning?
Friday's always the busiest. For whatever reason, I'm sure it's because people are maybe taking it a bit easier at work, but everyone wants to get everything done on Friday. So it's been a very busy morning, which is good. I'm not complaining, and I'm sure the afternoon will continue to be busy.
Nice. I mean, I think I've got kind of the luxury in the sense that it's still only the 7th of January, and most agents haven't gone back to work, so there's not too many listings up on the market at that sense. So I'm just kind of just making contact with wishing people a happy new year, and just kind of waiting for things to come through. But it's probably a really good timing moment for us to actually kind of talk about stuff like this, where it gives people who are starting to look into the property industry and may have held out last year and thinking, okay, well, now it's the right time, we'll start it fresh in the new year, and how do we go about it, and how do we set the right people up for success? And I mean,
look, Felix, I think with getting a team together for purchasing property, there is no doubt in my mind that people need a buyer's agent and a mortgage broker. There is no doubt in my mind that those are two critical components. Why do you think, what would you say to people is that the factors behind look, there's obviously a broad spectrum of people that get involved in a property transaction, but in terms of I think we should focus today on what a core team would look like, so that things don't get too complex and we can branch out in future episodes. But I definitely believe for a lot of people that a buyer's agent is a great person to have on that team. What do you think? Can you elaborate a little bit as to what your role is in the property, in people's property journeys, and how buyer's agents can support people?
Yeah, look, I mean, most people probably know the traditional real estate agent, which is someone who's selling property, acting on behalf of their vendor. Buyer's agent is someone who obviously represents the buyer and their interests, which is what I do. My focus and my core driver is to ensure that the buyer is looked after, and there is no kind of, we're
business.
No kind of messing about, but everything that we do is all for the client, the buyer, and there's no kind of we're not getting paid by the vendor's agent. There's nothing can kind of persuade the way we kind of operate. And so for us, it's all about looking after, making sure that the buyers, we meet the type of properties they're looking for, but also saving them time, money, effort, stress, them heading out there every single weekend looking for property, and kind of not knowing how to kind of communicate with the agents, or if the agent's kind of saying something, can they take that, or do they have to take it with a grain of salt and kind of understand that is that exactly where the market is today, or can they confidently kind of sit on what the conversation is? And that's where we kind of step in, because we'll kind of rule out all that kind of stuff, and we'll kind of draw it back down to what the numbers are saying, what the sales are saying, what the market's saying, and really bring it back down to the buyer and on simple English terms, and just say, okay, well, this is what it is. This is where offers are. This is where you need to be if you want to secure it. This is what would have to be putting forward to securing this property. So really just kind of making that transaction as transparent, as simple and streamless as possible.
Look, I think one of the most important things that you mentioned just then is that you take the stress from people in that buying journey. I see my own role as something similar, because it's you're almost acting in your professional capacity, in my professional capacity. When people ask, what does a broker do? Like, why should I use a broker versus going to a bank? I see myself as something similar to what you mentioned. You're almost like a surrogate for people's stress, and you're presenting them what can be a complicated and large transaction. You present it simply, and you go step by step. You have a process that you follow, and I think like people feel comfortable when they feel as if there's a process that they're following, that there's a set of stages that's going to get them from where they currently are to where they want to go. And I think stress absorption, being available, being someone who is like a soundboard and you can reverberate ideas off, I think for both of us, that's one of the key things. And if you don't have someone like yourself, people don't realize that they're going into someone else's process. Real estate agents are trained in negotiation and tactics that that make people feel pressure so that they can extract high prices. There's a ton of tactics that go out there into selling. Selling is obviously a really psychological thing. And I think good on real estate agents for doing those things, because ultimately they're supporting their vendors and they need to get a high price. But I think that being armed with a buyer's agent is one of those things that counteracts that sort of psychological warfare. That's too much of a word, but that's sort of the psychology that goes behind the buying and selling process. I think it's really good to be armed with that support.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I just had a meeting yesterday with a client, and one of the biggest things that she felt where after the meeting was that her stress levels had reduced, because she was just kind of driving around, last week looking for properties within her price point, and she was just getting stressed out because she couldn't see any available properties that suited her brief and her price point. And she's like, oh, what have I done? Like, I've just sold my property. Is this the right decision I've made? Can I even get back into the market? And having that conversation with her, I've able to kind of direct her and give an idea in terms of what the process looks like. It's not about just looking at what's online currently, but also scoping it out to understanding, what are her must-haves, what's important in terms of location, distance, amenities, and kind of say, look, it doesn't have to be exactly where you think it is today. We can definitely look at other options in other areas that are close by, but it could be something, not just a townhouse now. You could be considering maybe a duplex, because it's not so close to the water, that still fits within your price point and still gives you that ease of transport. And then when she kind of heard that, she kind of was able to take a breath and say, oh, wow, now I kind of feel a bit more kind of relief, knowing that I haven't kind of made the wrong steps in terms of selling, not being able to buy back in, but now having someone who's going to do all that heavy lifting for them. So it's definitely something that we do, and something that I enjoy, where we can obviously take all that stress out of the buyers and their concerns of not being able to find something, and have they done the
I'm glad you enjoy taking on all that stress.
oh, mate.
Look, and you know what, Felix, that's such a common scenario where people buy, like they sell and then buy, and that I deal a lot with that. And people there's a lot of inquiry around bridging finance and simultaneous settlements and all that sort of thing. And what you just said is such a big deal, because if you sell your property and then you can't find something to buy, imagine you're moving a family, 2 adults, 2 kids, who knows, like the amount of stuff that people have, that sort of thing. Like it can be a lot. And sort of flickering back and waiting for new listings to come up on realestate.com, like that whole thing would not only cause a lot of discomfort, but if you might end up settling for something that you're not actually happy with.
Yeah.
Imagine, like I get buyer's remorse from buying like a t-shirt that I don't like when I get home. Imagine getting buyer's remorse from purchasing the wrong property.
Oh, yeah. That's if you've got a mortgage, that's a 30-year investment, unless you can sell it and break even.
Yeah.
But look, I think, as we kind of mentioned earlier, to succeed in anything, and if one of the main things is to purchase a property for 2022, then I would say having the right people around you, mentoring, supporting, and guiding you is paramount. And I think we kind of spoke about this previously, was that, if you look at anyone who's successful in life, that they have the people supporting them, not only people within that success of where they're looking to achieve, where they can obviously leverage off their experience, but having people in specific sectors which are experts, so that you're not having to learn everything yourself, but you can leverage off their skills and knowledge.
Yeah,
Just like if we're looking at professional sportsmen, they've all got a team around them, whether it be the trainer, a coach, a manager, so
yeah,
they don't have to worry all about that noise. They can just focus on what they want to do and how they
yeah,
succeed. And similar to like property, if you want to succeed, whether it's buying your first home, investing in property and building a portfolio development, you need people who've been there and done that, because
yeah,
they can
absolutely.
share with you the steps and the process and give you the exact right method of doing it. And that kind of comes back to, okay, what does that team look like? Um,
Look, I think the number one thing that's probably preventing people from building that team around them and having that support, I think the number one thing is cost. Like, people are very that when it comes to opening their wallet, especially like, for example, with costs that aren't baked in, like, it's I'm somewhat lucky in the sense that I don't charge a fee, so my pay is somewhat invisible to the customer. So obviously the banks pay brokers on settlement, and it has no impact on rate or cost or anything to do with their loan. So there is no downside to someone using a broker. Whereas other professionals, whether it be a buyer's agent, a real estate agent, an accountant, whether whatever it is that people, whoever they're engaging, their solicitor, their conveyancer, and so on, there's a fee with all of
hmm,
those things. And what I find ends up happening is, like, people are always thinking about like
the
cost.
cost,
They're,
yeah.
they're thinking, and they're not thinking about upside. They're not thinking about like what the benefits are going to be. They're thinking about the short term cost. And in property, like uniquely in property, where the transactional value is quite high, especially in the markets that we mostly work in, like where the transactional value is quite high, the cost of these professionals is it's not insignificant, but it is easily, like, it can pay for itself easily. Like, a good purchase will more than cover the cost of, not only, for example, not only using a buyer's agent to purchase and a real estate agent to sell it if you end up selling it, but also the cost of having your accounting done properly, setting up the correct structures to buy in, all of those sorts of things. So, hey, Felix, who do you think, what are the types of professionals that most people will need on their team or should consider having on their team for the majority of property transactions?
Yeah, look, if you're looking to succeed in property, I mean, the first thing you'll need to do is have that right team around you. But the first person I would say you would need is someone in the lending space, and someone like yourself, a broker, who could give them the various options in terms of the type of products to suit their brief and needs. So that's very important. Having
Mhm.
someone on your side, not just from a product point of view, but understanding your specific goals. And I think that's what I love about what you do, is that you don't just kind of look at it from a purchasing perspective, but also from a journey, and kind of understanding exactly what these clients are wanting to do from a long-term projection, and kind of bringing that back down to what it needs to look like today in terms of a product. So I think they're the key benefits of obviously having a broker on your side, is that they can look at all the various opportunities in that lending space. I mean, obviously you've got your big four banks and stuff, which you could potentially go to, who you may bank with already, but then you're kind of just limited to that one outlet. The next player that you would need on your team would be your conveyancer or your solicitor, someone to vet the contract, someone who can read through all the legal documents and explain to you exactly what you're looking at and what you're buying, so you don't get caught out on anything. Um, Thirdly, an accountant would be quite handy to have, especially if you are buying an investment property, because you could speak to your accountant to understand exactly the type of ownership structure. You kind of mentioned previously, if you're buying, it's good to understand whether you should be buying in a company or a trust, or if there should be a split between the individuals from a joint tenancy point of view, or tenants in common. Just so obviously it could be from a taxing point of view. So that's a simple question you could just ask your accountant. And I mean, obviously, if you're already doing your tax returns with them, you could easily just call them up and say, hey, we're looking at purchasing this property. It's for this purpose. How should we have the actual structure, or whose names should it be in? And then fourthly, would be your real estate agent or buyer's agent. I mean, we touched on what I do as a buyer's agent. Not everyone uses a buyer's agent because it's only something that's kind of becoming more apparent now. But you
Hmm.
can definitely use a real estate agent to kind of obviously help you along that journey. Someone who's going to be able to provide all the opportunities and put all the right houses in front of you. I guess the only thing with real estate agents is obviously in an office, they're kind of restricted to the listings they have in terms of what they can sell. So
Yep.
then you're like similar to yourself, like someone coming in for finance, they'll go to one bank and then they're going to have to shop around. So if you're dealing with one real estate agent, they're going to only have a certain amount of properties that they can offer, and then another real estate agent. But by using a buyer's agent like myself, we can kind of look at all of that collectively and then say, okay, well, what's actually better for you? And then just streamline that approach and only handpick the right ones for you. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I would say, like, from my perspective and the conversations I've had with people, I don't really think the majority of buyers are like developing relationships with real estate agents in that buying process. Like, you know, you will often hear someone say, "Oh, if something else similar pops up, let me know." But it's not. I think really people most times are just jumping on domain or realestate.com and just doing their own search and not really worried about building a relationship with a certain type of agent. I think as you said, your function as a buyer's agent tends to be more broader spectrum. The same with me. Like, instead of just presenting people with like two or three banks as options, we've got like 60 plus lenders that we can
mm,
potentially introduce a deal to. So it's a lot broader. You've got a lot more scope. And within one street, you could have three or four different real estate agents listing properties. So if you would only go to one agent, well, you've automatically like restricted your scope. So I think from that perspective, and from what I've seen and heard, that the majority of people aren't really forming those types of relationships. I know overseas, like in America, it's a different proposition, isn't it? Um, I think a lot of realtors do work on the buyer side as well. I think it's a lot more
yeah.
common over there, and that model's starting to filter over here into Australia. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just the nature and the process in America. You typically wouldn't buy a property unless you're engaging in. They call it a broker over there, but obviously our terms is a buyer's agent.
Yep.
They typically wouldn't buy a property by themselves. They'll have a broker supporting them through that process in terms
Yeah.
of whether they're buying or selling.
So they're
Um,
used to paying a lot. Like, over there, they're used to having like 6% of the
oh,
value of the
easy.
property go in fees, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's obviously a bit different here in Sydney or Australia, where you're looking anywhere between 1.5 to 3%. In America, you're looking at double, but
Yeah.
that's where they had the capacity, obviously, to use that brokerage kind of service. But yeah, look, it is becoming more apparent. People are finding that time is kind of against them most of
Yep.
the sense when they're looking for property, and just the level of expertise. We're dealing in a very competitive market now. We're dealing with agents who are very well, not just trained, but very well rounded. It's not just someone who's just kind of dropped out of high school and they just figured, oh, I'll just become a real estate agent. It's
Yeah.
now a career that a lot of people are pursuing. So you're dealing with people who are very astute as well. And you're dealing with millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's the thing, Felix. You've got, is it like 50 or 60,000 real estate agents in Australia? I can't remember exactly what it is, but there is tens of thousands of them. And the majority of the market share is held by very few of them. So it's highly likely that in your buying journey, you're going to come face to face with you're going to come face to face with a hunter.
yes.
And they're not, like, when they got a reputation, they've got market share that they need to maintain. They're not going easy on anyone. So
No.
you've got to be prepared and know your numbers and have the support. Like, even as you said, like, no one really thinks to themselves, "Oh, let me organize the amount of times like people ask me for referrals to conveyances because they've not like looked into the process or understood that they even need a conveyancer." And I just think, like, that's one of the most basic things. Like, if your contract is not sort of, because it's a kind of a balance, isn't it? When you're buying, you've got your own wants, needs, and desires, and then the vendor's got their own wants, needs, and desires. And the role of the conveyancer is to mediate that and to make sure that both parties somewhat end up in a fair negotiation, and to make sure that there's no clauses or caveats or anything like that that could damage, or that could impede on the purchase.
Yeah.
So there's so many moving parts, and there are so many like points where people can come unstuck, and it's having that team and that support is really crucial to getting these larger transactions across the line.
But yeah, and look, what I found, it's when you have the right team around you, and if you're looking at a transaction, it could be very time critical. And if you don't have the right people who understand your situation and
Yeah,
can react as quickly, you could
yeah,
potentially lose that property. And I've seen it happen
yeah,
many, many
yeah,
times where they might be pre-approved, or and then they want to go on a 66W to buy something, and their broker may not be in the capacity, or their lender might
yeah,
not understand or not be aware of what the situation is, and they can't react quick enough, or if their conveyancer hasn't reviewed the contract yet and they say give me 2-3 days, while another buyer maybe had their conveyance already looked over it.
yeah,
And that's the importance of having the right players in your team, because if, like, I could easily call a conveyancer that I work closely with and say, I'm going to auction tomorrow, I need you to review this contract for a client this
and they'll
afternoon.
do it.
And they'll understand
Yeah,
the level of that urgency, and they'll do that for me, knowing that we're going to be bidding confidently the next day. And you need that on your side. So if you do see something you like, you can then say, yep, I can go all in confidently that you've ticked all those boxes. You know your finances there. You know the legal contracts are correct. You know what to pay for the property, and then you can move forward and actually make that offer. And that's how we purchase many properties over other buyers at a much more competitive price, because we're just well better prepared and we have the right
yeah.
people already supporting us. So very, very critical. Yeah.
I reckon that that leads, what you've just talked about leads me to the number one problem that I think professionals in this space have, that is why they're losing clients and not rising to the top, is because they don't pick up their phone and they're not responsive.
Yeah.
Like the amount of, especially with I shouldn't say that, but we in accounting and stuff like that, and sometimes like with conveyances, then with property transactions, like you're used to real estate agents picking up their phone, returning voice messages, like brokers as well. Like usually if you want to be a successful broker, the first thing you need to do is pick your phone up when it rings.
Yeah.
But if you have like someone on your team who's not responsive, they don't return calls quickly, like that's not good, because you can't move quickly in a
Yeah.
transaction where sometimes speed is the differentiation between winning and losing.
Absolutely.
So it's
Absolutely.
one, you've got to find people who are professional, they know what they're talking about. But two, like it's critical that they're responsive, because if they're not, like you can have all the knowledge in the world, but you're still useless. So
Yeah, yeah. But look, I think we've kind of rounded up, and kind of anyone looking to succeed in property this year, like, had those four key players on your team. And I think the next episode we should do is really kind of dive down in each individual profession, and kind of share the importance of it. Obviously, I'd love to obviously kind of get a bit more insight in terms of what you do. Obviously, I know what you do, but for people who are watching, and that importance of having the right, person in that finance space to kind of help them along that journey, because it's
yeah,
not just that one transaction; it is
yeah,
very much a journey. I think that would be very powerful, so people will understand why it is important to have the right
yeah.
team professionals on your side.
We can get a conveyancer and accountant to come on as well, and we can interview them too. So we'll do those. We'll gather up some questions from people who are interested in listening in, and we can present those to those other professionals too. And then we can get a well-rounded and present a well-rounded perspective of what each person's role is within the transaction and the purchasing cycle.
Yeah, sounds good. So look, for everyone who's looking to succeed in 2022, and if property is one of your key agendas, then definitely the four key players that I've kind of mentioned that I feel that you need would be obviously someone in the lending space like Tim, a broker, a conveyance or solicitor to help you with your legal documents, an accountant, which can tell you in terms of what the ownership structure should look like, and then to provide you the opportunities, a real estate agent or more buyer's agent.
Yep.
And look, let's jump into that. So for everyone listening, the next session we're going to do, we're going to dive more deeper into the professional field of what Tim does as a broker, and how that's really important to have the right person on your team in that lending space. So yeah, stay tuned, and we'll be diving into some deeper questions with Tim.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone, and see you, Felix. Good chat.
Yeah, you too. Speak soon, buddy.
Bye.